Welcome to Dilip Oak's Academy webinar. Today, we are inviting a special guest, Maggie Wolford. Before that, for those who do not know me, I am Dilip Oak, founder of Dilip Oak's Academy. In today's webinar, we will mainly discuss about current situation in American universities and job prospects after completing masters. I know due to the pandemic, many of you are apprehensive about going to America, and most of you have already deferred your admission to next year. There are a lot of doubts as to what the situation in American universities is and how they are planning to deal with the pandemic. So to give you a better idea about all this, we have with us our guest speaker for today, Maggie Wolford, the Director of Admissions and Recruitment at Watson School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, SUNY Binghamton. Let me give you a brief introduction of Maggie before handing over microphone to her. Margaret Wolford is the Director of Recruitment and Admissions of Binghamton University, Thomas J. Watson's College of Engineering and Applied Sciences. She previously served as the Watson School's Graduate Recruitment Coordinator before devoting her efforts to international students interested in pursuing their graduate degrees in engineering and computer science at Binghamton University as the International Graduate Recruiter. As Director, Maggie oversees the Watson School's graduate recruitment efforts worldwide, working with a tight-knit team to share the university's unique offerings, and represents the Watson College at various graduate and school fairs, forums, and conferences, and meeting across the US and internationally. So, brief introduction, I would like to invite Maggie to take over from here. But before that, let me remind you that after the webinar, there will also be a question and answer session where you can get your doubts clarified. You will have to raise your hands, and then in the sequence, we will unmute and you can ask your questions to Maggie and she will answer that question. We have limited time. We will continue this webinar till 10:45. So we'll try to cover as many questions as possible. But in case if we are not able to cover those questions, you can send an email to us. I will give you the email address and I will forward these emails to Maggie and she will reply those questions. So I request Maggie to take over. Hello, Maggie.
Hi, Mr. Dilip Oak. How are you this morning?
I'm fine. So all the students are waiting for you.
Okay, well, let's get started then.
Yes.
So hello, everyone. As Mr. Dilip Oak said, my name is Maggie Wolford, and I'm very glad to be speaking with you today. We've got three main topics that I'm going to be addressing today. How are American universities coping with COVID-19? When will universities resume classroom teaching? And the career prospects after completing a master's, especially in this time of COVID-19. A few things that you're going to hear me say several times today are that every university is handling things a bit differently. So there are very much case-by-case situations that will have to be dealt with. You should be in touch with the university that you are applying to or have been admitted to at each step of this process. And I would also just note that this is an ever-changing situation, so please do be patient with the university representatives that you're connecting with. We are really doing our best to try to answer all of your questions. And if we're unable to answer a question, please just know we are also frustrated by that. We really do want to help students to come to our universities, have a smooth transition. And unfortunately, there's just a lot of unknowns as we continue in this process with COVID-19. One other thing I want to make really clear as we're getting started is that I certainly don't know the situation at every university in the United States. So I will be speaking in some generalized terms this morning. I can certainly reference some specific situations at Binghamton University as examples, and I can also share what I'm hearing from colleagues at universities across the country. I am really hoping that at the end of this session, you will come away with some insight and context into the American university process and ensure that you are equipped with some of the right questions to be asking the particular university representative you may be connecting with. So with that, let's jump in. So to that first question, how are American universities coping with COVID-19? So there are certainly a lot of factors to consider with that question. First, I think one of the most important factors would be location. Binghamton University, for example, is in New York, and in March, that was not a place many people wanted to be. And so we were very clear that we're in an area called upstate New York, which is about 3 hours from the city. So how our campus handled the COVID-19 crisis was very different than universities that are in the middle of New York City. We actually have a lot of students originally from New York City, and so we did not want to close campus because then they would have had to return home. And of course, New York City was the epicenter of the virus in the United States for quite a while. And so many universities have to be mindful of their location. Is it rural? Is it in a large city? And they also have to be thinking about the type of campus that they have. So for Binghamton University, Arizona State University, some of the larger, especially state universities, but also some private campuses and R1 institutions, COVID-19 has certainly caused some complications and some problems, but we're looking at maybe budget cuts where small liberal arts universities, some of them are considering closing or are laying off whole departments of faculty. So how our different campuses respond to COVID-19 can sometimes be a question of survival. So if you've applied to what may be a smaller liberal arts college, this may be a question of what does next year look like? Will this campus still be functioning in a year, 2 years, long enough for you to get your degree? Another factor to consider are the university's testing policies. These should be very easy to find on the university website, but some universities have compulsory testing, others have voluntary testing, others have only testing if you are symptomatic, and then others have very unclear policies. So that's another thing to be looking at, because it will also give you a sense of possibly how seriously that particular campus is taking the COVID-19 situation. And then one other thing you can find by doing some research online is the number of current cases in the specific community of the campus you're looking to join. So again, we're in New York State, but in Broome County, where Binghamton University is, the number of cases has remained low throughout the pandemic. And a few weeks ago, when it looked like the numbers were starting to increase, we decided not to move all campuses online or all classes online for the semester, but to do a 2-week pause where everything was done online for a short amount of time, just to try to reduce the number of cases. And it seems to have worked. People have resumed in-person classes and things seem to be going well. So again, there's just a lot of factors that are specific to the university you're looking at that will let you know how that university is coping with COVID-19. But a few things have been relatively universal. Almost every university made some kind of adjustment to the fall 2020 semester, whether that meant pushing their start date or moving up their end of the semester date. Some universities will be doing the last week or two or final projects all online, and some have decided not to have any breaks during the semester so that they could end early. Another rather universal thing seems to be that most universities are pushing the spring 2021 start date to be in early to mid-February for most campuses. This has a lot to do with just the annual flu season and it being a bit difficult to initially tell the difference between symptoms of the flu and of COVID-19. So a lot of universities are trying to push the start date to get away from the holidays and to try to get past some of that initial flu season before students return to campus. So one question I have received quite a lot over email is whether COVID-19 will be impacting funding. And the answer is yes, but in very different ways. So for example, teaching assistantships are usually granted to departments by the university based on budgetary allocations. So with many universities looking at budget cuts, they're likely to see a decrease in the number of teaching assistantship lines that they're able to offer. That doesn't mean they're all going away, but it may mean they're going primarily to PhD students, for example. This is certainly something you can ask your campus about to see how, if at all, they are being impacted. And then when it comes to research assistantships, this largely will depend on the funding agency itself. So for example, if you're going to a university or department that does a lot of work in healthcare or supply chain management or other things like manufacturing that are very important right now, they're unlikely to see cuts to their funding. But if you're looking at a program that has maybe primarily federal grants or small government grants, or that receive funding from very small agencies, those funding lines are likely to decrease. And so you may see a decrease in the number of research assistantships available from that department or that university. Many more of the administrative positions, such as graduate assistantships, are unlikely to be impacted, largely because we need the help with answering student inquiries, trying to offer webinars like this. We really do need student assistance with those projects. And then one question that you may want to ask your university specifically is if an offer of funding is contingent on you being physically on campus. Now, especially if you've heard the university is going to be doing all of their coursework online, that may seem like a silly question. If all the courses are online, why can't you also do an RA or a TA online? But for most campuses, this is going to be an issue of taxes and human resource policies. So for many universities, there's a requirement that you physically be present in the state or county where the university is placed so that you can be registered as a new employee and receive payment. And it may be an issue of needing a bank in the United States. There's a lot of factors there. So again, be in touch with your campus to ask about impacts on your specific situation. One thing though, that I think may be positive for many students is that universities really seem to be doing all they can to try to spread a bit of help to students to try to incentivize you to actually come to campus. So I've seen a large increase in the number of what we're calling micro scholarships, $2,000, $5,000, 10%, 15%, 25% tuition scholarships, anything that the university can spare to try to give a little bit of something to the student to encourage you to actually come or enroll in the classes. One other question I've received a lot over email is about what can students do in the summer of 2021. As I'm sure most of you are aware, international students are eligible for what's called CPT, which allows them to work off campus after completing one full academic year as a full-time student. So students who deferred to spring 2021 or who have begun studies online but are not arriving in the United States until spring 2021 will not be eligible for CPT in summer 2021. Now, we certainly understand that the summer is when many students are doing internships, and the internships are a great way to get your foot in the door at a company and to potentially get a job offer. So many universities are trying to find alternate offerings to give to students. A few examples would be offering more summer courses so that students could potentially graduate even a semester early and be able to complete their studies a bit more quickly. Another option is that a number of universities are offering on-campus internships in labs, in offices, through local companies, but you're still being paid by the university, because if you're a campus employee, you don't need CPT. So a lot of universities are trying to increase the number of internships offered through their own campus to students as an alternate. And one other option that's come up quite a lot is what we call resume builders. So certifications, Lean Six Sigma training, micro-credentials, other things that you can list on your resume and LinkedIn profile. So maybe you don't have an internship, but you do have a number of certifications that a company may be looking for. And then one final point to make on the question of how universities are coping with COVID-19 is the impacts on 2021 admissions. Many universities and departments are increasing the number of GRE waivers that they're offering. They're also accepting new exams, such as Duolingo, and almost all of them now accept unofficial transcripts for your application itself. So that's a bit, I feel like a lot, but that's a bit of an overview about how universities are responding to COVID-19. So then specifically to the question of when will universities resume classroom teaching, I feel like it's important to note that many universities have already done this. Overall, again, there's still individual factors to consider, like the location, campus type, testing policies, and the number of cases in a specific community. But it's also just important to note that no two universities seem to have the same approach to this. Many have gone all online, some have offered hybrid, and a few have said that they're offering everything in person, but if you're sick, please do things online. So while all of the classes may not be online, they do have sort of short-term options if you fall ill or need to take a break from physically being in the classroom. So again, this is a situation where you may need to talk to your specific university. One thing to note, for example, is that many universities have not yet made a decision regarding spring 2021 and if classes will be in person, online, or some kind of hybrid model. For a lot of us, the big issue is that that is still 3 months or more away, and we just don't know what the COVID-19 situation is going to be. If a university is announcing at this time what they're going to be doing, it's more than likely they've already made a decision to go all online or possibly hybrid. So again, be in talk with your university, but a couple of specific questions you may want to ask them would be, does the mode of instruction affect the availability of some courses, especially when it comes to if you're wanting to take particular electives? And then also, does the mode of instruction affect the tuition and fees you're going to be paying? Some universities, for example, have an online tuition rate. And so you want to know if you qualify for that, certainly if it's a lower rate than the in-person tuition. But some universities, including Binghamton, only have students qualify for the online tuition rate if they're enrolled in a fully online program, which is actually different than if you're just taking all of your classes online. A fully online program is if the entire degree has been certified to be done online. So not just one semester or a few classes, but say the full 2-year master's. So again, there can be a bit of ambiguity there. So it's good to talk to your university. And then one other point on this question of the, in-person teaching and how this might affect you and your students would be, what happens if you decide to defer? Many universities do have this option to defer admission up to 1 year. But again, there's a few questions you might want to ask your particular university. Is the admission guaranteed? It is at Binghamton, but it may not be at some other universities. You also want to ask if you need to resubmit any application materials, such as test scores, an updated transcript or mark sheets, things like that. If you've already paid a deposit, you should ask if it's going to be honored or if you're going to have to pay another deposit for your new term of admission. And then finally, back to the funding question. If you were offered funding and you defer your admission, you'll want to confirm if that funding offer is going to be honored for your new term of admission. So the last big question is that piece about career prospects after completing the master's. So one thing I'd like to share with all of you, and I will send the link in the chat, is there was a great article that came out a couple of months ago, that was from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco Economic Letter. And it examines how workers in America with different levels of education have fared since the start of the pandemic. So I shared the link. You can access that at your leisure, but a couple of key takeaways I wanted to point out. And excuse me, but I'm going to be reading this directly from the article. The fraction of total job loss for workers with a high school diploma or less is substantially larger than their fraction of the working age population. In contrast, the pattern is reversed for workers with a bachelor's degree or higher. In sum, since the onset of COVID-19, a college degree has provided a form of insurance against job loss. So for students who are coming in and they're wondering about what this is going to mean for opportunities for jobs, really the number of opportunities for students with a college degree, and even more so for those with a master's or anything above a bachelor's, has not been greatly impacted. There has been, as it says here, a form of insurance against job loss. And then later in the article, there's another set of data, and excuse me, I'm going to read this piece again. The data show that almost 65% of workers with a bachelor's degree or higher reported teleworking in response to COVID-19. In contrast, only 22% of workers with a high school diploma or less had teleworked due to the pandemic. The data show that individuals with a bachelor's degree or higher were almost twice as likely to be in a low contact job as compared to those with less education, while those with less education were more likely to be in a medium or high contact job. So for me, for example, when we transitioned to working from home, it wasn't really too big of an adjustment so far as my daily work. I'm mostly doing things on email. Now, of course, all of my meetings are on Zoom, but it was a fairly seamless transition. I don't get to travel, which is a bit of a pain, but you know, the type of work that we're doing is something that can be done over telework. And even when I return to campus, I'm there a few days a week. I have my own office. I can shut the door. I don't have to worry about being in contact with people throughout the day. And this has largely been the case for many of our students who have been able to go into jobs and internships. I actually just lost my student worker, Ashwin, who was able to get a position at Global Foundries for an internship this summer. So he applied for that and secured and started the position all remotely. And then when they started bringing people back into the office, we helped him move up to Albany, which is a couple of hours from here. And he was able to work remotely a few days a week and then physically go into the office a few days a week. And he's done so well that they've kept him on for the fall semester as a co-op. So it's a bit strange, certainly, but there are a lot of companies and even universities that are hiring in the midst of this. I'm on 2 search committees right now, and while it is a bit different to do their entire interview process over Zoom or Skype instead of physically bringing them to campus, it really has been pretty easy to do. And then we work with them to get all of their HR paperwork in and make their transition to being an employee, even if they're not physically coming into the office every day. The biggest and best piece of advice I think I can give about that question of career prospects is really to make sure that you're utilizing the university career services offices at your individual campus. They're going to help you with resume review. They often know about different job opportunities. They'll review your cover letter, help you do some mock interviews, and especially with navigating this entirely digital process, they'll be able to give you some good advice about navigating that, how to negotiate salary if you're doing everything via telework, how to navigate if a position is really going to be advantageous to you as an employee, different things like that. So talking to those offices and also talking to your older students, your seniors who've gone ahead of you, will definitely be a good place to start. But for the number of students I've talked to who are concerned about the prospects after they graduate, really for those who are starting right now, you know, we really, really hope that by the time you graduate, there's going to be a vaccine and that largely we will have moved past COVID-19. There will certainly still be ripple effects that we're all feeling, and this may change the way a lot of companies work. Maybe they will offer more telework options, but 2 years from now, again, we hope there's a vaccine and that this won't be impacting the job market in the same way. But even for current students who have graduated this May or are looking to graduate in 2021, I really do believe the majority of them will be successful if they're utilizing their university career services and ensuring that they're giving themselves the best chance. I know that was quite a bit of information. Much of it was broad strokes, but I hope it gave you a little bit more context and gave you a few more questions you may be able to ask your particular university. But understanding that I'm sure you all have a lot of other questions, as Mr. Oak said, we'll now move into a time for